Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you guys about sometimes there's misconceptions where we talk a lot about at Launch Code that it's a 3-month apprenticeship. And so what you can actually bank on is that companies agreed a minimum, we'll let you come work at the job and we'll just see how it goes. And so I often will get calls from students who might have landed their first job on a tech team. And they'll say, Claire, it's been 90 days. Like, where's that full-time offer letter? And so the really tough part about the apprenticeship model is your flexibility and your performance at the job and, your output. All those things combined really impact like whether or not they'll convert full-time. And so the really cool news is Launch Code's getting really good at this. So 8 out of 10 apprentices that we send out to, test run these jobs work out, and these guys will get full-time offers. So that's really what we were hired to do, is to get you guys as many jobs as we can. And so we often hear about cool companies through Launch Code grads. So we would definitely encourage you after liftoff to be close with us, and we should definitely connect on LinkedIn. And we want to learn like what jobs are going to be most exciting for you too. And so you guys probably have a lot of questions about COVID, and it's definitely impacted the job market, and how fast we can get job offers in front of you. And so we would just, say that sometimes the best folks that get the most opportunities will be real positive, super resourceful, and just stay like kind of in your learning mode. And we'll be able to work together to, say, well, that MasterCard interview maybe didn't work out so great, but, what about charter? Maybe that's a better fit for you. And so we like to find out, do you like small companies or big ones? Do you have a background in electrical engineering? Maybe we'll introduce you, to the Emerson team. And so it's really kind of custom fit for you. So I kind of wanted to see like what concerns or questions that you guys might be thinking about as you get ready to finish up your coursework.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Hannah, by the way. I doubt you can see the names.
Hi, Hannah.
I hope this doesn't sound too bad, but I think one of the things I'm worried about is how do I even know what I'm actually qualified for? I don't really know what jobs to even look for when it comes to that. So.
Yeah, great question. And guess what? Here's the good news. We know that you don't know, and we might not actually either. Yeah. So something I've noticed is that customers also don't really know what they need all the time. And so if I come to you with an opportunity, it might not have a full job description, to be honest. And so we're asking that you guys maybe just keep an open mind. You could get a front-end development job or a quality assurance opportunity, and you're like, I don't know, I've never heard of QA. But if you kind of trust kind of the Launch Code process, but we have great reputation with these customers, and they know that Launch Coders are driven, passionate, and able to hit the ground running. And so we're often going to ask you, well, so what did you used to do? Like, what's your skill set? Are you really good with tough customers? And so often we can take your 20-year career at Pizza Hut as a delivery driver and use that as a really big value to a customer that might need customer service. And so, never discount your background or where you came from, because I think that's how companies really love how we're different than other people. Something I want to know is like, talk to me about the money. So I'd love to talk to you guys about kind of how the money works too. And so as an apprenticeship program, the customer agrees to hire you through LaunchCode's payroll. So you become a LaunchCode employee, and your business is issued from LaunchCode on Del Mar. And we provide full health care for you or your family if you opt into it. And after 6 months, we do have 401k matching. And so with some of these benefits package, we start all of our apprenticeships at $20 an hour. And what we ask the companies to do is, give Hannah a chance, and she will demonstrate in 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, that she's a good value to the team. And at any point, the customer can say, you know what, I want to hire Hannah. I want to convert them full time. So during our time together, while you guys get experience on tech teams, they're going to be paying LaunchCode for your work, and we're going to be paying you. So you and I would have the same insurance, and you and I would get paid on the same day, just like Greg too. So it's kind of cool because we're all a family and we all are on the same program. That being said, some customers like to just hire you right away. And that's okay by us. We are ready to get people jobs. If they want to bypass the apprenticeship period, we ask that the company will pay a placement fee. And so you guys are going to get hit up by lots of recruiters. I'm technically a recruiter, but as a nonprofit, it's great because we don't have to charge companies these super high fees. And, that's a really great differentiator between our program and you guys being contractors out there with other programs. Really just make sure you're thinking about, your best benefits. Recruiters love to talk to launch coders. And the way that we help keep education free is through our apprenticeship model. And so by you guys deciding to go that route and doing liftoff and working with us on these interviews, we'll have a much better chance of getting you into a good job at a company that we work with. So we want to make sure you guys know some of the features and values of getting a job through LaunchCode that might be different than some of the things that people are going to be sending you. And, this is where you can lean on me or Greg or pretty much anyone on our team is, I got this weird link from a recruiter that wants me to do this kind of work. Like, what do you guys think? We are happy to work with you on that. That's really our job, is to kind of like finesse some of these jobs that are a good fit for you.
Claire, I have a question here. Back up for a second here. You said for the first 90 days, 12 months, whatever, we work for LaunchCode. I am not a young person, and I have a little bit of security where I am.
Nice.
So it's very intimidating to give that up for the potential of another job.
I understand.
Comments?
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of people who are in your same position, maybe they love their company, they're not actually looking for a job. That's okay. We might be able to help you finesse a role that's where you could stay at your current employer and not lose, any income projection. So in that case, we have had launch coders in the past who told their company, hey, I graduated from LaunchCode. This is what my new skill set is. Like, how can we stay here? And develop, we've developed a couple ways that people have stayed at their company and just kind of hop teams. So it's great that you're in that position. And a lot of people do take a pay cut too, to be honest. So it really kind of depends on how much you want to work on a tech team or, you know, pivot into these skills. It can be hard though, you know, the grass is always greener. Sometimes it's not. But for the most part, if any of the payment arrangements are different from that $20 per hour standard rate, we'll definitely let you know. But we understand, you know, you have to do what's best for you and your family.
Yeah. Well, but that's kind of where I was. Well, part of my question was, okay, if hypothetically we don't get a job offer in 12 months, what happens with our interaction with launch code and even, okay, the job I'm at now, there's a lot of physical labor to it and my knees aren't the greatest. And so I have always wanted to code.
Yeah.
And I work for our parent company is rather large. And I'm sure there's probably something that I could maybe do in there. But if not, and I don't get a full-time offer, what happens after, say, 12 months?
Yeah, so that's the good news is, like, as a Launch Code alum, you know, we're always going to be partners. There's no expiration date there. And so we'll continue to either send you jobs until you say, hey, I'm really not interested in a job, so you can take me off the matching list. That's no problem. Like, we still want to have you be part of the Launch Code community. And as long as you're still open to receiving opportunities from us, we're going to keep sending them to you, even if 12 months go by. So we work with a lot of folks that, you know, have been looking for a job over a year. And so we do the best to match the team and the skill set. So let's say you worked in manufacturing. You know, we have a lot of people who are in tech teams in manufacturing. If that opportunity comes up and we're able to work with you on that, I think it's good to always keep the doors open. So what we try to do is give you as many options for your process as possible. You know, and with your help, you can probably dig up your own opportunities as well. So this is really something you guys can think of as a partnership, but it really does go both ways.
Okay.
Claire, I was going to step into Jay to kind of answer and maybe give you a little bit more background too. You would never want to quit your job until you've already landed an apprenticeship. Once you're in that apprenticeship, which can last, you know, typically 3 to 6 months, but it can go longer. 4 out of 5 of our apprentices do end up converting to full-time. So of course, nothing is a guarantee that at the end of that 3 or 6 or 12 months that you will convert, but we do average 4 out of 5. Companies have a pretty good idea of what they're getting when they come to Launch Code. And then the other thing that I would just kind of add to what Claire was saying is that once you've done that first apprenticeship, if for some reason that company did not convert you, you've got that on your resume, and it is significantly easier to land a tech job once you've got one on your resume. So while nothing is guaranteed, and we would never want to say that, you know, want to imply that at all, you know, the conversion rate is pretty high, and the success at leveraging that into a second job, if needed, is also pretty high.
Okay, I have one more quick question here. I don't want to monopolize, but I remember Sean saying things that, you know, the turnover rate at a lot of these tech jobs is, you know, 6 months or whatever, and people go get new jobs. And is that a common practice, or is that just, I mean, do these jobs last for the duration of a project, or are they just an ongoing thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we will have the agreements set up with companies prior to you guys ever, you know, hearing about these jobs. So we will have the company make sure to pay, you know, a living wage. And if you stay in the apprentice for a year, that $20 an hour gets you pretty close to your standard St. Louis salary for entry-level tech income. So we shoot for about 55 grand a year. And so the company has promised to keep you employed under their wing as long as either they get the project launched or completed. Another way the apprentice period could conclude. Another way it could end is if you get fired. It doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes people act crazy and they do get fired. And then the last thing is that things like a global pandemic can happen. And by no fault of your own, some of these roles can get furloughed. And so it is very interesting post-COVID because people really saw a new value in launch code, because although they knew, unfortunately, they had to lay maybe 10 people off, they were able to hire them right back on. And so I could see that being a concern of y'all's, because you really want stable, reliable work. And so we will make sure each company has given you a guarantee of 90 days at minimum and 40 hours work week. So we don't really engage in part-time opportunities, and we don't engage in contract specific work. So they signed an agreement that says, yes, we have every intent to convert this person when we hire launch code. And you know, where we send you on your first apprenticeship may not be your forever job. It's just your foot in the door job. So we ask you to keep a really open mind. And I've had so many people who work full-time now at companies who said, you know, Claire, thank you for convincing me that I could go for that job, because I would have never applied for that. And so we will challenge you guys in a friendly way. Last week, I got a call from a guy who works at NVIDIA, which is like a gaming company in Brentwood. And he said, Claire, you know, I've been this apprentice for a year, and I just can't believe I'm working at my dream job, and they just offered me a salary letter. Like, can you help me with the negotiations? I said, yeah, sure. So we recommend, you know, at least $55,000 a year plus for this job. And he called me back a couple of days later and he said, oh, Claire, I did not have to negotiate. They came in at 6 figures, and I've been doing this for 1 year. And so he was ecstatic, because although he did take a huge pay cut to be this apprentice, he ended up converting like 4-fold from his previous job waiting tables. And so that was like really the launch code magic that Greg and I have the opportunity to hear a lot. These stories they're very common and very frequent. And so we just ask that you guys trust us, because it is a very like customized and flexible approach. And it works. Go ahead.
So I know you said you mentioned if you have jobs kind of already in tech, and I kind of had a question. I'm NVIDIA. I work for Geek Squad, so I deal with the consumer side of technology. So I was wondering, I guess, how many partners, or like, what's your access to places like that? So like, i.e., I don't know if you ever heard of Ring or any of smart home or automation like companies, NVIDIA also included. Like, what's your tie-in, and how would someone who has any in the tech industry on the consumer side, like what would that look like transferring over to development?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for Geek Squad specifically, we don't have any friends over there. So it would be so great to work together to perhaps meet some of those decision makers on the tech team. We cold call a lot of companies, and when they hear the launch code story, they're very impressed. And so we would love to work with your tech teams over there if you have any recommendations on who to reach out to. But although we don't like share our company list or offer up our playbook like that, we constantly are evolving partnerships. So right now we carry a load of over 400 companies in the country that are hiring with Launch Code. And it's growing a lot. So feel free to reach out anytime if you have a specific list, and we can let you know, like, each account rep that works that relationship and who's hiring, and who do we need to call a Geek Squad. So yeah, we'd love to work with you guys, like kind of back to like that two-way street. You can put us to work too.
Cool.
People like the Launch Code story. They like to know that you guys came from totally different walks of life. And so never discount that you were a stay-at-home mom for 30 years, or you might have been a manager at Taco Bell. Like, we're able to use these in a lot of usable ways to make you shine in your interviews. So that's something I would just kind of a tip is try to really lean into your confidence on what you have been doing. And now we're just going to shift it into tech. So we will try to encourage you to kind of think bigger, because you can do it. Like, if you can get through Launch Code, the rest of it's just going to be an awesome journey.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
So as you said, the apprenticeship will be a full-time, but what if a person wants to do a apprenticeship, half,
Mm-hmm. Part-time.
part-time?
We do sometimes have part-time roles, but
Mhm.
typically we do not offer part-time jobs because we pay for health insurance and it's quite expensive.
Mhm.
So the companies that we work with will only have probably about 40 hours of work week.
Okay.
And so I would still encourage you to finish liftoff, even if you are interested in part-time roles, because every once in a while those do come up. But probably about 80% of the time, maybe 88% of the time, it's going to be full-time roles.
Okay. So I really didn't catch that you said we are going to be paid by the launch code for our while doing our apprenticeship. So
Correct.
And then when we go for full time, or when the company hire us, so if they pay us, they are going to pay the launch code, or I didn't get that point. Sorry.
Sure. It's in other ways to describe it, it's called contract to work, where you start as a contractor at another company and you're moving on their team towards a conversion. And a conversion means that you go from a launch code employee to, let's say, the software developer at Panera. And so we like you guys to know that you would be employed by Launch Code. And Launch Code pays your paycheck, and the companies pay us back.
Okay.
And that's also why we can't do part-time, is because to have eligibility for medical benefits, you have to work full-time.
Okay.
Does that help answer the question?
Well, so I'm sorry, I'm still confused. So
Yeah.
the apprenticeship is going to pay, while we are on apprenticeship, the launch code is going to pay us. But when we get hired, the company is going to pay the launch code, and launch code is going to pay us. It is a cycle, or am I wrong?
No, after your apprenticeship is over,
Okay.
and let's say you're gonna work at Panera, and they send you an offer to work there full-time. At that point, you are no longer employed by Launch Code.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a light switch where the Launch Code paycheck turns off, and then the company employer that hires you turns right on.
Okay.
And you usually do not miss any gaps. So your paycheck or your income is not affected. And I think maybe I might have been the confusion But I was just describing the difference between the apprenticeship model,
Mm-hmm.
where you work for Launch Code,
Mm-hmm.
or the company can hire you directly. And we don't have many companies that do that, but sometimes companies, they don't want to do apprenticeship. They just want to hire people directly. So one of the companies we work with that does that is Centene.
Oh, okay.
So Centene is a medical, healthcare company. So they like to offer their own healthcare.
Okay.
And that's exactly why they would say, I'd rather just hire Launch Code directly.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you would, that was just the difference.
Oh, okay. That
But I
makes
like,
sense.
yeah, I like you guys to know how we pay for everything to work. How do we keep education free? And it's through these contractor models that help fund the entire program.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
May I ask a question as well?
Mhm.
I guess when you talk about the success rate of finding long-term employment of 4 out of 5, I guess what is the most consistent attribute or behavior that the 4 have, and what is the 1 lacking?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a lot of variables, but I would say people who are constantly in this state of learning and never stop Googling and never stop watching videos or pursuing new certifications, those are the 4 folks out of 5 that are getting the jobs. It's usually a strong attitude and ability to work with teams. The people that are not converting are, I think, having trouble working with a team. They also could be at a company that has a budget shift. So you guys might have heard in the news that the Boeing 737, was basically a tech nightmare that impacted hundreds of people's lives. As a result, the folks that we were working with at Boeing were furloughed. So Boeing had a big shift in their budget by no cause of their own. Did they ever anticipate that apprenticeship ending? But due to unforeseen circumstances in the business, that apprenticeship concluded. And so Boeing likes that we're flexible and we can move with their business model. But we also try to protect you guys, and we're trying to get you to that next level of life, in your income, in your learning track. So I definitely see a correlation with people's attitude and the people that are getting the highest paid jobs. Does that help?
My attitude.
It can be frustrating. I mean, it's hard to land a job on your first interview, So we see the people who have patience and persistence, like those are the people winning at the end.
Well, I'm going to step in here. I think that we're going on a little over a half hour now. You will get a chance to talk to the company team again, probably in liftoff. So if you've got more questions, don't worry. You're going to get to talk to the company team again. But I'm really glad Claire could join us. I do want to clarify real quick. I mentioned 4 out of 5. That is 4 out of 5 people that convert after landing an apprenticeship. That doesn't mean that like 4 out of 5 students who graduate get a job or have a job within a certain time frame or anything like that. I don't want to present it like that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about once you land the apprenticeship, 4 out of 5 on average convert. In terms of how long it takes to get an apprenticeship, it can really vary. Claire, do you want to say anything about that?
Oh yeah, and all your questions are really good. You guys are thinking ahead, and you're gonna have so much more. And so we would love to connect with you. I think we could definitely connect immediately on LinkedIn. So my name's Claire Anderson, and hit me up. Like, let me know what your questions are, concerns. We would ask that you definitely trust the process of liftoff. So Greg's gonna be your captain as you embark on that journey. And right after liftoff, that's when I get to work with you. And so much is going to change from now to then that we're just really excited for you guys and talking to companies now about you and your talent and what you can do on their teams. So don't be a stranger. And yeah, we're looking forward to cheering you guys on at graduation.
All right, Claire, thank you so much for joining. And Kyle, we'll let you go ahead and take over.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank
Claire.
you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
All right. How's everybody doing? Good. Everyone awake
Alrighty.
now? Way more awake. Hopefully I didn't let anybody down on our awesome surprise guest.
Absolutely not.
Right? Well, I'm getting stuff here. One thing she did talk about is that everyone's background. One thing that, not really a regret, but something that I don't bring to the table is that I've always been in tech. I've always been a nerd, unfortunately, ever since I was born. So my background has always been in tech. One thing I really love about Liftoff is that everyone comes from a diverse background. So never think that that is, again, something that weighs you down whatsoever. If anything, it makes you indispensable. You bring a different perspective than any nerd like me could bring to the table. Like the Panera example she gave, if you work at Panera and then go to code for Panera, you are literally entering the floor as an indispensable person. You have so much knowledge about the true reality of the world that coders don't have, that again, it makes you just gold to the business. And the fact that you can code is mind-blowing. So what she said is absolutely correct. And honestly, hence why I love Liftoff, hence why I love just working with everybody here, is that you guys have just the coolest backgrounds. All right, let's get to it here. Today, we are diving into object-relational mapping. So that is what we get to work with today. Let me keep getting set up here for just a sec. Oh, there we go. I can see everybody's face. Fantastic. All right, everybody ready? I had like 2 cups of coffee. I was like, oh, no, that's fine. I can just do like 1 more cup of coffee. I won't be like too hyper. Now I'm too hyper. So this is what you get today.
I think you missed your calling as a motivational speaker, truly.
Thank you.
I mean, you're a great coder, but really, the motivation is where you shine.
I'll take that. I'm going to start like, what is that? Cycle Bar. Have you ever been to Cycle Bar? They are true motivation coaches. Like as I'm dying on a bike, like 15 minutes in, they're like, no, it's okay, Kyle. You're not going to die of a heart attack. Yeah, they are where I get my inspiration for sure. But thank you though. All right, so let me actually open up the right channel I need to go to. Don't forget, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them on the lecture questions channel. But let's get started here. So object relational mapping, as always, starting out with those announcements. Today we have no announcements, except that technically, I usually lie on this slide. I do have an announcement. For some reason, YouTube or just my mental capacity is letting me down lately. I do have those things to be scheduled to be released, but for some reason, they just keep staying private. So I apologize. The exercise review for this past exercise is out there on the exercise playlist. Feel free to check it out. It was just released very late today. That was not intentional. The next one should be on time, so fingers crossed for that. So thank you for this. Thank you for calling that out. A few people did that on chat, so thank you for that. If you guys don't see it, please reach out and ask what's up. It could be late, or it could just be YouTube or myself just failing at it. So there we go. Everybody, we are on lecture 14 right now. We have made it so far. We are so close to the finish line. I'm so excited. You guys grow up so fast, to be quite honest. So what we're going to do here, right? Thank you. What we're going to do here is build everything that we have done to this point. So let's get started. We're going to start with the master of the request and responses. Who is this?
Controller.
Very good. The controller. Controllers accept requests. But my question is, who's sending those requests? Who sends requests? The user. I'll also take one more answer. Anybody else have another name for it?
The view.
So not essentially the view. Another name would be the user interface, or the client side. That's who's sending us those requests. Remember, we send them back a view. But we'll talk about that in a second. When that request actually comes in. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss a question there? When that request comes in, it can take the shape of what? Who can tell me what this is?
Get request.
Not essentially a GET request. Think after the GET request. If I come in as a post request, I'm bringing in something that's in the MVC model.
Response.
Accidentally said it though. It is actually the model. So it is coming in as a model. So we have M and C here. The next question is, data that is sent over the request, including models, are often used to create something else that the user sees called what? And we already heard it today.
You.
Very good, the view. Awesome, that HTML there. So remember, our models are those classes, our dog, and our view is that HTML that we're creating. Who can remind me what the technology we use to bring in models into our views? What is that called?
Time leaf.
Very good, awesome job. Yes, time leaf, that is the technology we're using. So there we go, let's continue on. Once we have the controller, it responds back with that view to the UI, to the user, to the client side, so they see something pretty on their screens. And this is it. Let's keep building. So we know that we can have more than one controller. Though in these depictions that I usually have, I only have one controller, but we know, because we're smart people, that we can have more than one. The first one being a cat controller, and our second one of all, as always, being our dog controller. And then we have our requests and responses being sent back and forth from these controllers. But another question about technology, who can tell me what we use to make this MVC possible with
Data
our
layer.
controllers?
Data layer.
Not the data layer, we're looking for a technology. So you told me time leaf as a technology. What technology are we using here with Java to make this possible?
Spring Boot.
Very good, Spring. We're using Spring here to make this possible. That's what makes MVC a reality. Now, let's talk about communication. Cats and dogs don't like each other. Unfortunately, goes back to Roman times, or maybe even before that. So cats and dogs typically don't talk to each other. So we can't do this. We can't directly talk to controllers. So who can tell me, what do we bring in so that cats and dogs get along? Very good, the data layer. That's the data layer, fantastic. So that data layer allows our cats and dogs to talk to each other. Now, my question here is, what happens if we shut down our Spring server? We have a lot of cats, we have a lot of dogs in our pet palace. What happens when we turn off the server?
500 error.
Not just an error. If we turn off the server, you're not going to get back any errors. You're not going to get back anything because our server doesn't exist. So that means if we turn off our server, all of our data goes away. Once you turn off your server, all the cats and dogs you've ever created in the world disappear because that server no longer exists. That data layer within the server was the thing keeping that data at home. So once you shut it down, it's gone forever. Hence, we brought in something new 2 lectures ago and also last lecture that keeps our data around. It helps us remember. This is our database. The database keeps information persistent, as in it keeps it around so we can remember it for years and years to come after our server shuts down. But we still haven't really discussed yet how we take our server, this Spring thing, and talk to our database thing. And how we do that is through Object-Relational Mapping, or ORM. We use ORM here to communicate between the server itself and the database to keep that information flowing. Now, this is all great and dandy, and I drew a beautiful picture, but what in the heck is ORM, and what does it actually do? And that's what we're going to explore today. So let's answer that question. What does it exactly do? Let's bring back in our dog controller, and we'll create our beautiful depiction of a dog here. And we'll have this dog object have some things on it. So it has an ID, a name, an age, an owner name. So this is the left-hand side of our diagram. This is our controller. It has our dog model in it. Fantastic. Let's talk about the right side. We have our database here. And in our database, we always have tables. Dog objects and tables don't look like each other. One's an Excel sheet and one's an object with a bunch of data in it. These are apples and oranges. Hence comes the chef for the fruit salad, ORM. ORM is there to translate between the two. So what do I mean by that? If we have this dog object and we ask ORM to bring it into the database, what it does is it translates that dog object into a table. One thing I do want to point out here when it did translate is that owner name that was camel case before is now snake cased with that underscore. Do note that this is what ORM does. Just a quick little note there. And once we have that, we can populate this table with information. This is the one-way street, the first one-way street of the ORM, taking that object and translating it into a table, automagically, kinda. So let's talk about the other way. When it goes back, we can ask for our dog objects, we can ask for our dog data from the database using that ORM as well. So it will transfer back that information from the database and convert it back into our dog object, something that Java likes. Remember, Java loves objects. Java loves classes. Java doesn't like tables. So therefore, we need to translate it back into the object using the ORM from the tables. Remember, databases, MySQL, Apple, dog over in the dog controller, oranges. We use ORM to translate between the two. And how we do this, I keep saying ORM, but the true person behind all of this, the true star of the show, basically, with all this translation, is called Hibernate.
Oh my God, dude, my neck.
Is it all right?
Sorry.
No worries. So we use Hibernate here to translate from the database to the dog controller, that ORM. So any questions on a high level, what ORM is doing?
Is this, so say if we were using JavaScript and not Java, is this kind of the same, or is it the same like process?
So how you communicate with, it depends on how you're trying to communicate with JavaScript with the database. In this case, ORM and Hibernate are very Java specific. So to answer your question, I can't really answer your question because I would have to know what tools you're using in JavaScript. So I guess could you take it one step further, what your question was entailing?
Well, I'm just like you just broke down the whole process, you know, with the database and the, you know, the models and all of that. So I'm wondering if that is going to be the same. Maybe not this next step of how databases communicate with the controllers, but before, you know, the graph that you laid out beforehand, are those, the way that everything processes, is that going to be the same? Well, similar?
So if we're talking about are you talking about from JavaScript to SQL? Okay, so for that, I actually don't know. That would be a completely different tool. Hibernate, at least from my knowledge, is very Java specific. So as of right now, we're talking very specifically Java to MySQL. Yep. And then, yeah, if feel free to research, and I can also research that too. If there is definitely going to be JavaScript to Hibernate. So
well, that's okay. Yeah, when it comes up, I can look it up too. I just
cool. No, great question though. Yeah, languages like yeah. Please, Alexia, go ahead.
So this is Hibernate is something called a mapper, right?
Yes.
Is a mapper just basically like an interpreter? Like, is it just a bunch of code that translate ID = 1 into the SQL language way for making a column?
You just broke down the black magic of Hibernate. Yes, absolutely. It translates what we have in our objects, turns it into SQL queries, transfers it over to our SQL instance, MySQL.
Well, this is a dumb question though. Like, what's the difference between a mapper and an interpreter?
So the mapper is going to, I'm trying to get, what's your definition of an interpreter at this point?
Well, that's like, all I'm thinking of is, for example, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I kind of get what Julie was asking, and that, like, I think at some point in JavaScript, we had used something called an interpreter that would like take our code and turn it into something that worked in the program that we were using. And so when this mapper concept came up, it reminded me of that process.
Okay, I would have to get more.
Basically just, it just seemed like it was just translating one language to another.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look up exactly what the example was from the interpreter one, but essentially that's kind of what it's doing. I'm not gonna say one way or another because I don't exactly know what the difference between this mapper and that interpreter that you use in JavaScript would be. All I can say is that I agree with you that it sounds very similar, is that it's gonna take the JavaScript or Java object, see what it's related to, so strings, integers, maybe other objects, and map that to your SQL database. So nearly just interpret it and then insert it or update, depending on what that is, with queries.
Cool.
So very good question. Yeah. If I find out more, I will let you know on that as well. Okay. Any other questions? Good start off. Okay. Everyone had coffee. Awesome. Who else has questions?
Oh yeah, I had way too much.
That's great to hear.
I got something called nut pods today. Has anybody here tried that? It's like some new dairy-free.
Nut pods. I'll have to try that.
They've got toasted marshmallow flavor.
That sounds really good. I would go for a toasted marshmallow right now. Any other questions specifically on this before we start diving a little bit deeper? Okay. All right. So now that we're on this, let's go ahead and just quickly take a look at what we're actually going to be working with here. So over here in our dog example pet that we've been using, what we have to do here to start actually bringing in Hibernate is bring in two implementations. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Excuse me. I'm actually going to copy that line because I want it to go a little bit quicker. There we go. And I take out Spring Boot here and I put in starter. Oh, I don't want to type this wrong. Data dash JPA. Perfect. And then the second one is to actually create the MySQL link, MySQL. And SQL dash vector dash Java. There we go. We have our little icon pop up here and we're going to go for it. So we had to bring in these two implementations to start using our example pet to work with Hibernate. And let's fingers crossed that it actually builds. Well, that thing is building, we're going to come over here and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the database we're going to be using. Just like in our past examples, we've been using these pet databases here. We have my dog table and owner table. What I'm going to be doing here is that I want to actually access this database and create tables using Java. To do this, I'm going to have to create a user. So I'm going to go to administration, go to users and privileges, go in here, add an account. And my login name is going to be, example pet. There we go, example and pet. And then in here, I'm going to put localhost because all I want to do is be able to access this through my localhost. And that famous password, learn to code. Don't tell anybody about my super secret password. Learn to code, exclamation point. And then learn to code again. As this, exclamation point. Okay, there we go. And then I go over here to schema privileges. Don't forget about the schema privileges. Go ahead and click add entry. Selected schemas, coding events. Nah, that's not what we want. We want pet database, please. Press OK, and then select all and press apply. Don't forget about these schema privileges. Don't forget about these schema privileges. I have helped out countless people with forgetting the schema privileges because if you forget this and you try to actually access your database through Hibernate, it's going to say, who are you and what do you want? So don't forget about that. Now that our application is created here, I'm going to go back over here. Looks like Gradle built correctly. And the final thing I need to do is go to my application.properties. I need to change this because that's not what I called it. Is it? Or is it? Pet database. GK. Totally had that right. There we go. Learn to code. And pets database. Fantastic. And this is boilerplate stuff. I literally copied and pasted because there's no way I have enough space up in my head to remember all this. I can barely remember my own name. So I just copied this over. Feel free to copy this down or use it from past examples as you move your project move project to project. All right, so we have this all set up. Any questions about just configuring all of this?
I had a question. In the book, you had to enter localhost, I think, in the MySQL So just it's always going to be for us right now, that, right? Always going to be
Correct.
localhost? Okay.
Absolutely, yep. Because we're just going to be working with this database on our local server, on our local machine. So just, yeah, all I have to worry about right now is localhost there.
What was your first import? I remember you said, what was it? I'm sorry.
Let's go to build Gradle. And my first implementation was this one. And then it was that starter Java JPA. And then the MySQL connector -Java.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions?
We're always going to be using those two, right, as well?
For Hibernate, yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
okay.
you want to bring these two in.
All right.
For Hibernate and MySQL, excuse me. Yes. All right, let's keep going. So my question's back to you all because I am done talking for a second. How do we create a dog model, AKA a class?
Public class dog.
Very good, public class dog. I will do a little work for us here. I will add all of those nice little things we just worked with, the ID, name, age, and owner name. And now one thing I want to add next, which is self-explanatory, we always need a constructor, but I want to talk about it a little bit. We are going to insert here an empty constructor. And we do this, and we make sure we do this because Hibernate demands that we have this. If I'm going to be using this model or this class within Hibernate, as in I want to keep its data, I need to make sure I have an empty constructor. It is absolutely crucial. After that, you can create as many different constructors as you want. I can create this one. It's not going to do much, but I want it here just in case. And then, of course, I can just add my appropriate getters and setters. So this is how I would start setting up my dog model or my dog class. So now that we have this all set up, let's talk about what we just came from. Our dog controller talking to our database using Hibernate. Now, these two are having a conversation. Hibernate's going to be asking, tell me if you want me to have a table created for you. You need to tell me something here in order so I can understand that I need to create something as a table. That something is what we need to talk about. How do we tell Hibernate that we want our dog model, our dog class here, to become a table in our MySQL database? Well, we go back to our favorite thing, annotations. We supply an annotation at the very top, this @entity. This tells Hibernate, the specific annotation, that this is going to be a table. This dog now will be converted into a table and vice versa with Hibernate by using this @entity tag. So this is extremely important. So don't forget this annotation. Let's move on. Let's go back to this beautiful table. Someone tell me, how do we keep our rows unique in a table? What do we use?
Primary key.
The primary key, very good. We use a primary key. Now looking at our table here, which one do you feel like should be the primary key?
ID. ID.
Very good, the ID, that's where our primary key is gonna live. Remember, ID is something unique, should be always a primary key. So let's hop back. We have our entity here, but remember, this is going to be a table, meaning we need to assign one of these things here to be our primary key. So that's what we're going to do here. We're basically setting up a table in Java so Hibernate can convert it. So we need to add this annotation @ID to say that our private int ID is actually our primary key. This annotation tells it this is going to be my primary key. So that's what we have here. Make sure you always have an @ID somewhere in your entity. Let's go back to this create table that we saw in the past 2 lectures. Someone tell me, how do we make SQL create our IDs for us when we're just not feeling up to it? What do we need to add?
Auto increment.
Very good, auto increment. This allows SQL to create our keys for us, our IDs for us, and increment 1, 2, 3, etc. So we don't have to. Saves us time and effort. Like we said, we have to come back to our entity. This is going to be a table, so we need to say the same thing here. And so what we do is we actually add another annotation below the ID annotation called generate value. This tells our table to create the IDs for us, to auto increment, to generate those values, so we don't have to. So any questions about this? Because now we're going to go. Yes, please.
So I was working along with the chapter, and I kept having problems importing entity, and I asked for help and we couldn't figure it out. And the only way I could solve the problem was by checking out to a different branch again, like starting over. So what I want to ask is, what has to be there for this at entity to work? Is it like, does it have to have something else in another file?
Make sure that those implementations are there. The ones that we did in the previous example in this lecture. That's where entity is going to come from. Is Spring Boot, but I believe with JPA.
And which files were those? Was it the build.gradle file?
Right here. So we go to build.gradle and make sure that this implementation is there.
They were there, but it just still wouldn't let me import.
It's the
Once you do
Java
that,
X persistence under the controller.
Say that again, Jeremy?
Java X, like dot persistence under the controller is where it comes from. That's probably where you're having the problems. I had the problem with it. I had to do the same thing.
Okay.
Alexia, I had the same problem for the longest time, and then I noticed a tiny little button that was like something to the effect of, your Gradle file has been updated. Click here to like make those updates be real, or something to that effect. And I had to click on that, and then it ended up working.
Oh, okay.
So
I guess just keep your eyes peeled for a little button in your
Load
Gradle.
Gradle changes or
So-
Control-Shift-O.
Yep, very good. Actually, everybody's correct. So Alexia, once you add this implementation there, just like I did, there will be a top right very little button that has the cycle to say rebuild your Gradle. That's why it was building in the bottom. If you want to, go ahead and click on Gradle, and also you can click this one right here to
Okay.
reload everything to help you out.
All right, thanks everyone.
Absolutely. Great teamwork, everybody. All right, let's keep going here. We're going to implement now our entity in our dog class. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to actually edit this a bit. We are going to add a private int and then an ID here. We're going to keep this validation. We can absolutely do that. That's not a problem at all. We have our age, and then we have our empty constructor here. I'm going to take out this, though. I do not want that in there. There we go. And what's the first annotation I need to do to make sure this dog object is something special to Hibernate?
ID.
At entity.
At entity, very good. There we go. So we have our at entity there. And now I come down to my ID. And what are the two annotations in place here? The first one, to make it the primary key, what do I put?
At ID.
At ID.
At ID.
Very good. Awesome. And then what's the second one? So I can be lazy and not increment my IDs.
Generate value.
Generate value.
Very good, everybody. So we have our ID generate value and then our entity up here. Awesome, awesome. Our dog is on the way to be inside of our database. Let's go back. So now that we have all of that, let's move on. So we're gonna bring in that dog controller. And now we have our class all set up. Our model is there with our entity. So fantastic, we are good. It's saying I'm all set up. The database is over there on the right-hand side saying I'm ready when you are. But these are two sides. We are missing one big thing in the middle. Can someone tell me what that is?
ORM.
Say it again.
ORM or Hibernate.
I think I'm getting too many people at once, so I'm just gonna give it to you. And if you did say, I do apologize, but it's gonna be the data layer. The data layer is what's gonna lie between our dog controller or any controller and our database. The data layer is what actually communicates with the database using ORM, using Hibernate. And then the dog controller just utilizes that to get its information out of there. So our next step is actually to discuss about the data layer here. So let's talk more about it. We need to set up this data layer. Originally, if we go back to our dog data here in our other data layer, all it was just a bunch of static array lists just containing our dogs. Then this is completely fine, but again, we discussed earlier that once I turn off my server, my dogs are gone. The dogs, who let the dogs out, like starts playing and everything like that, all the dogs are out. So this is not exactly what we want here. We want our data to persist. So therefore, we're going to create something called a repository. And how do we begin that? It would say public interface dog repository. I call it dog repository because dog is what I'm going to be containing inside of here. If you're containing pizzas, you're going to call it pizza repository. If you call it cats, it's going to be cat repository. The big thing to call out here is that it should always be an interface. Remember to create your repositories as an interface. Moving on, this data layer wants to talk to the ORM. So we need to create some way for it to actually communicate with our database. So we bring in a special tool that Hibernate gives us. What we do is that we're going to extend the dog repository to use the CRUD repository. That special tool, this CRUD repository, again, comes from Hibernate. It's going to give us the tools to talk to our MySQL database. The CRUD repository takes in two different things inside of its pointy brackets. The first one being the entity type that we want in our table. Who is this repo for? What's the data type? And that answer is the dog. It's going to be a dog repository, so I place dog in there. The second one is about what is the data type for the primary key. As we've already talked about in most of our examples, our identifiers have always been integers. However, it's not always limited integers. You can have strings in here as well. Strings are also a very common identifier, but right now we're going to stick with just integers. I like 1, 2, 3. That's simple enough for me. So, and that rhymed. That did not mean to do that. Anyway, we're going to stick with integers here for the primary key data type. So this is how we set up our dog repository. The final thing we need to do is make sure we always have the annotation @repository on the top of our dog repository. Sometimes Java lets us slide with this, but I do recommend for practice, put that repository annotation up there. It does absolutely help, if not absolutely critical. So do have that annotation up there. Let's go ahead and build our dog repository now. What I'm going to do is going to come into data, right click, new Java class, go to interface and call it dog repository. Did I spell dog repository right? Cool. All right. Pop quiz. What do I need to do here?
Extend
What does it extend?
CRUD repository.
Very good.
At repository.
And then I need to put pointy brackets. What do I put inside these pointy brackets?
Dog.
Very good. And then what's the second one? What actually is this?
Integer. Data type.
Integer. The data type for what?
Is an integer.
Primary key.
It's the data type for the primary key. Very good. Import class. And what's the last thing I need to do?
At repository.
Very good. @repository. Sweet. There we go. We have set up our dog repository. All right. Let's keep going. We now have our data layer talking to the ORM using that CRUD repository with our dog repository. So that's how we set up that connection there. The other connection we talked about just briefly was we need to have that dog controller now talk to our data layer. So let's talk about more how we're going to do that. If we come in here and say we wanted to create a dog controller, how would I actually do that in code? What do we put?
Controller.
@controller, very good. That's one part. And what's the second part? What is it?
We need a variable.
So we need to create a dog controller. So a dog controller is actually what? It's not a variable, but it starts with a C.
Class.
Very good. It's a class. We start building our controllers by saying public class dog controller. And then just like you all pointed out, we need to put that annotation up there that says @controller. This is how we create a dog controller class. Continuing on, and what'd you say, Jeremy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was referring to the when you pull in the CRUD repository into the controller. My bad.
Oh, okay. No, you're all good. As long as you know where you got it from. Perfect. All right. let's keep going on this then. How do we create a get mapping for dog create using the dog.html template? How do we do it? What do we start with?
At get mapping.
At get mapping.
Request mapping.
Request mapping is very good. I like that. Yep, request mapping, get mapping. In this case, I'm just doing get mapping. And then we need to actually create a method here. But my question is, what do we return?
A dog.
Very good. We just returned dog. We dropped the .html because we were going to use that dog.html template, and we returned dog. Very good. Any questions? Remember, this is controllers. We're getting back into this tonight. So any questions about this? All right. So let's talk about how to now attach our data layer to our controller. And it actually isn't that hard because luckily Hibernate is going to do a lot of things for us. What we're going to do here is put dog repository and dog repository here within the controller itself, just like how we did with dog data back in our previous examples. This, when we put this here, is going to allow our controller to talk to that data layer. But one last thing we need to do is that we need to add a special annotation so we can truly sit back and let Hibernate do all the hard work. That annotation that we cannot forget is @AutoWired. Remember when we're setting up a repository to use @AutoWired. Otherwise, we're all going to have a bad day. So just use AutoWired here. What, am I going to get into what it does? Absolutely not, because I have not the expertise to actually have a conversation about it. So all I have to say is use AutoWired. It helps out and makes you have a better day. So this right here is actually setting up our repository in the dog controller. And yes, I forgot to click the button here, but saves us from a lot of headache. So let's go ahead now and set this up. We're going to...
So sorry, I had a question real quick. So with cat controller, you also need to, you would create a cat repository for each controller?
For each model.
Okay.
So yes, you'd want to create a cat repository for a cat model. But say I only have one controller called a pet controller. That's it. Maybe in this pet controller, I want dogs and cats. Dogs and cats are two different models, two different classes. I'd create a repository for each. So what does this mean? It means that controllers do not dictate how many repos that you have, repositories that you have. The amount of models that you want saved in a database do. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get to it. I'm actually going to do this below all these comments. All right, so I'm going to say private. I forgot to put that in the example, but I'm going to just put private because that's what I like to do. So dog repository, there we go. And then what's that annotation that I need to add?
@AutoWired.
Very good, @AutoWired. Sweet, there we go, we're all connected. All right, so we're getting close. We can almost save all of our dogs. All right, so we have our repository created. Now that we have the connection actually established, let's talk about how to actually use the connection. Real quick, what do I use to pass an attribute to a template?
Model.
Model.addAttribute.
Very good, model. And then add attribute, very good. So we're gonna say model.addAttribute. And now what I wanna do is that I'm going to just hypothetically add all of my dogs in my database to my page through the attributes. So what I do is I start with the attribute name. And now here's where the fun begins. I'm going to call to that repository, the dog repository, and use a CRUD repo method that it uses, or it lets me use, called findAll. Basically what this is saying is that give me all my dogs back. I want them from my database. This will allow us to access all that dog data, and it brings back a bunch of dog objects from a database that is, again, just an Excel sheet. This is the beauty of Hibernate. It's taking all that two-dimensional data, all those spreadsheets of dog information, and bringing us back some great old dog objects, something that Java really wants. So this is where the beauty really comes in. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So in here, what I want to do is that I'm going to actually do this and my show all my dogs. So I see my dog data, get my dogs. What I'm going to do down here now is model.add attribute and say dogs. And then how do I call to all of my dogs using my dog repository?
This dot get
We got to use dog repository.
dot find all with it.
Find all, very good. And if you look in here, there are a lot of methods that we can use with this. So there's find all, find by ID, things like that. So I'm going to do find all because I want all my dogs back. And I'm going to comment out our previous one here. All right, should we run it? Should we actually see if what I'm saying is true? I'm actually really nervous right now. All right, everyone cross your fingers, drink your coffee. Let's see if it actually works here. Jeremy, do you think it's going to run?
You never know.
I like it. I'll take it. Sorry, I got to pick on you. You're the only screen right now on my 5 screens that are on. So I mean, you got to talk to somebody. No one else wants to talk to me. Uh-oh. Oh, no. What's this? Job exception.
There it is.
Oh, no. You never do know, do you? Let's see. Unable to open a JVX connection.
Oh, you have to change your passwords in the file you what's named over. In properties, yeah.
I did learn the code here.
I think your username.
Yeah, you're using.
Oh, it totally is, isn't it?
Example.
Very good. I mean, good test, guys. You all pass. Awesome job. Example. I just want to show you all what the warning looks like. Thank you very much. So this is it. So that persistence layer, that's what it's going to look like. So let's try to rerun. Second time's a charm, maybe. Thank you. All right, finished. No more errors yet. Oh, another error. Who are you now? Oh no. Okay, let's see. Okay, example pet. Example pet.
Your login name.
The database.
And you gave it as example.pet.
Go
I see what the
go
problem. I
back
see
to
what
the
the
There
problem
you get
is.
pets.database.
I see what the
It's
problem
pet
is.
database instead of pet database.
It is pet
Yeah,
database.
you wanna
All right.
remove that S in pet's database.
Yes, I do. Okay, and username and password. There we go, pet database. All right, never mind, JK. Third time's the charm. Ugh. Fingers crossed. Come on. Sweet. Yay. There we go.
Boom.
Boom. All right, let's go over to localhost and see what's going on. I forgot actually what routes did we create with our dogs? Dog controller. And I need show. Did we put a request mapping up here? We did not, so it's just gonna be /show. So let's do that, /show. All right, so we don't have any dogs in our dog list. So this is okay, we just started creating this. This is all fine and dandy. Let's go over to our schemas here and see what's going on with our tables. Look at our 2 tables, my dog table and owner table. Let's go and refresh all right now. And we see now we have a hibernate sequence. Don't worry about that table. And then our dog table. That's what we like to see there. Perfect. So now we have our dog with our ID, age, and name. Fantastic. All right, so let's go ahead and take it one step further. And now we're actually going to write to our database. We did this before with our dog create. So this is going to be a little bit trickier. Not really. What we're going to do here is we're going to call to dog repository now. And what I'm going to type in here is save. And it's going to ask for an entity, AKA the dog type. I'm going to say my dog. I'm passing in a dog object to my data layer to send it over to my database. Let's see if this works. Oh, and I need to comment that out too before anything happens. Stop, don't do the thing. There you go. Even though that wouldn't have broken anything, my OCD just gets a little tiffy. Oh, drum roll. There we go. All right, dog/create. Let's go to it. Dog/create. There we go. Someone give me a dog name.
Fido.
Fido. All right. Age of, let's say 9 today. Getting up there. Oh, it needs to be longer. Jeez, what's our validation at? Who did this? All right, dog. Oh, jeez, we have 10. All right. Fido. There we go. Create. All right. You just created Fido. Awesome. Let's go ahead and see show. Oh my gosh, look at that. My dog's name is Fido, and I am 9 years old. Fantastic. Let's go over to our table real quick and refresh and see if everything's okay. And now we have Fido in here. Everything I like to see. Look at that. We have now saved Fido for another day. It's going to persist in this database. So that means we can use it tomorrow and the next day, and we can shut down a server as much as we want. Perfect. Any questions about what we just did?
Kind of. It's kind of a one-off. So you know how we removed the dog data?
Yes.
So like, do apps implement something similar to that to save information when you're running the app and then remove it once it's closed, but also have a persistent layer?
To answer your question, yes. Apps will typically cache your data on the device, especially if it's offline, and utilize that. So kind of like our static little data layer, but then it will talk to the mothership, per se. Then it will beam up your information, kind of like what we did. We save it to a database. So we'll do a mix of both, because you don't want to send up every little thing about the device up into the cloud, because it costs money to save stuff on a database. So it will actually do a mix of both. So very good question. Any other questions? Cool. So then we have done a lot, everybody. So everyone take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. We're going to do some trivia. Not trivia, but I kind of want to know if anybody knows this. Can anyone tell me what the technical name of the hashtag symbol actually is?
Is it a pound sign?
It's not the pound sign.
Hash?
No, not even a hash. This one is called an octothorpe. Octothorpe. I didn't even look up the pronunciation. It's actually the true name of the pound hashtag symbol.
Wow.
Right?
TIL.
Is that what they call jolly old England? Like,
no, it is. It's kind of like goes back to Old England. Apparently it was drawn like a village, and it's like, I forgot how the word, I read the whole thing, I already forgot it, but it's kind of like how it looks like in a village, and it looks like streets or something. I don't remember, but this is what it's called. It's crazy. Now I know we have some chefs in the audience, so anybody know how many folds there are in a chef's hat? Anybody?
I promise, this is so weird. I just read that maybe about a few days ago. I don't know why or whatever, but I completely forgot.
It is 100. 100 folds in a chef's hat.
What?
Yes, but
no, I'm teasing.
But even crazier, what do those 100 folds represent? They represent 100 ways to cook a what?
Chicken? No.
Egg. An egg. Very good. It is 100 ways to cook an egg.
I guess we know which one came first now.
Right? All right. If you like that one, you might like this one. The national animal of Scotland is what?
Is it a sheep?
Werewolf. It's not.
A werewolf?
Question is the Loch Ness Monster.
I will give it to you. It is close to the Loch Ness Monster. It is actually the unicorn.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
That. No,
Yeah.
That's weird. Why do I know that?
Is that true?
It is true.
It
Yeah,
is
it's the
true,
national
yeah.
animal. The chocolate treat M&Ms stand for what?
Mars and Mars?
You got Mars.
It's Mars and something, but I can't think what the other thing was now.
Muri. It is actually, I think, the son of the Hershey person. Hershey CEO or something like that back in the day. So that was what M&Ms stand for.
Okay.
Right? All right, everybody got their breath in? All right, perfect, because one last thing we need to go over. Yep, take that last breath, great, because we're going back into reality. We're talking about our dogs and cats now. We're gonna bring back in that dog class, bring back in that cat class, and I will be nice. I'll bring in the ID, name, and favorite treat now for the dog. And I'm going to bring in the ID, name, and the favorite perch for the cat. Now, my question to all of you is, how do we turn this cat and dog into something that Hibernate can use? What do we need to do? What do we need to add?
Identity.
Very good. We need to add that @entity annotation. Now, one more thing. How can we make this ID that are both in the cat and the dog the primary key and generated for us?
@ID and @generated value.
And I didn't even realize I used the answer in the actual complete sentence. So there we go. Yes, very good. ID and generate value. Yes, how can we create this as the primary key? And whatever, I tried. Yeah, and I thought the coffee would help. All right, so @ID and @generated value. Very good. But my question to all of you is, we see a lot of different variables here that are very much related between the cat and the dog. So what do we do when this happens? What do we need to create?
Abstract.
Say it again.
Abstract class.
Very good, an abstract class. We want to create an abstract class called a pet. And that's where we put all of that shared information into this abstract class. Now, we see that ID and the name are there, but favorite treat and favorite perch are different. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move that information into the abstract class. This is still allowed in the Hibernate environment. We can still do this. Nothing is wrong with this. The one thing we need to make sure we do is that we need to extend pet. As always, that's nothing different from inheritance. But the last thing we need to do is that we need to make sure that Hibernate knows that this is a magical abstract class that we're going to be using with our other entities. How we do that is with the annotation @mapped superclass. This tells Hibernate that anything that extends this, look inside of here and get more values for my table. This saves us writing code and still helps out Hibernate. So we can still utilize all those beautiful tools of Hibernate, but we need to make sure that we use this mapped superclass annotation. So that's what we have here. And after that, we are technically finished. I'm not going to show you an example of the map superclass because, spoiler alert, that's what we all get to do tonight in the studio. So feel free to be doing that, but I'm going to open it now to any questions that anyone might have.
Is it possible to run a MySQL database on a different device within my local network?
The answer is yes. If you want more detail, I can give you more detail. But yes, you can technically run a MySQL database on another computer. Say you have a friend over on your local network. You can run it on theirs, and you can talk to it through your own computer. That's going to be just local IPs, and you can just use local routing through that. But I'll give you those keywords there. Feel free to Google that and look into it further if you want. I like your one-off questions tonight. It makes me like, oh, I love that stuff. But anyway, I can't get into it too much though. So any other questions on anything we covered?
I have one, but it's not really something we covered. I noticed that your SQL Workbench has a dark mode.
It does.
How did you get it to do that?
Magic. I don't actually know, and I can't turn it off because people have asked me to turn it off. And I go into the settings, and I think it did it in the beginning, but I have to like manually edit the hexes now to get it back to white, back to light mode or whatever that is. So to answer your question, it gave me the option when I was downloading it on the Mac to turn on dark mode, but I have no idea how to revert it. So to answer your question, literally magic. I don't actually know. It just kind of happened.
You gotta try.
Mine's dark too.
Well, now I feel left out.
It is actually a lot better. I do like dark mode, but it doesn't make good for YouTube videos. Any other questions?
Just want to say that I'm surprised there hasn't been any ambulances in the background this whole lesson.
That is true. That is very true. I don't know what's happening. I guess everyone's being at their best behavior tonight, which is nice. The first thing I come into in my apartment after a few weeks gone is just an ambulance sirens, and I was like, wow, they missed me. All right, going back here, where is?
Because it's raining.
Yeah, that could be it. All right, Zoom, that's cool.
Even if it's raining, though, you'd think a lot of people would get into accidents because they don't drive properly.
Oh, that's what I meant. I meant it's strange that they're not, because how bad people are drivers.
You guys are so dark.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take it. Don't jinx it. I will take this silence right now. It's been pretty nice. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for joining me here tonight on our lecture. That is all I have for everyone. I will stay online, or I'll stay after class for a bit. Isaac, you asked me to, and then I think there's another student that also wanted to stay behind. So I'll stay here for a bit, just answer a couple questions. But other than that, thank you everybody for joining. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great weekend. And I will see you all back here on Monday.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
Have a
Thanks,
great
everybody.
Thank
All right now.
Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.